Hello, dear dreamers, and welcome back to the Bohemian Sisters channel. Find your coziest blanket, settle into your softest pillows, and let the busy world outside just melt away. Tonight, we're not telling just one story, but three, each a little echo of a tale you might think you know, remixed for our modern, wandering hearts. We'll begin in a city that never sleeps, where a digital connection and a real world rivalry collide. It's a story for anyone who has ever found a friend in a screen and a foe on their street and wondered if the two could ever be the same. Then we'll slip back in time to the glittering, gritty jazz age, where a chance meeting in a shadowy alley leads to a week that changes everything. It's a reminder that sometimes our fairy godmother doesn't wear a gown, but a cloche hat, and our prince might arrive not with a crown, but with a proposition. And finally, we'll drift into our most timeless tale of all, a story of two souls, born into a feud, as old as the city itself, who find a love so bright it threatens to burn their whole world down. But tonight, we're rewriting the ending, because sometimes the most powerful magic isn't in a potion, but in a choice to simply walk away and build something new together. So close your eyes or leave them softly focused here. Let your breath slow and your heart open. Tonight we explore the stories of love found in the unlikeliest of places, in an inbox, in an alley, and in the quiet decision to choose your own destiny. The first time I saw you, the world went quiet. Not in a romantic, movie score swelling way, more like the universe had sucked all the sound into a black hole, leaving only the frantic thump, thump, thump of my own heart as a backup track. It was at that stupid, cavernous warehouse party that Rosaline had dragged me to, the kind where the bass is a physical entity that vibrates in your teeth. The air was thick with the smell of cheap beer and expensive perfume, and I was already calculating the most polite exit time. Then I saw you. You were a splash of cool water in an overheated room, leaning against a concrete pillar, a red plastic cup in your hand, laughing at something your friend was saying. You wore a simple white t-shirt that glowed under the black lights. And your skin, a rich, warm brown that seemed to absorb the chaotic strobes and reflect back something calm and steady, was a map of a world I didn't know. Your laugh, even from across the room, was a real one, unself-conscious and full-chested. And you were a Montague. It wasn't a label you wore on a jacket. It was in the subtle shift of the crowd around you, the way my cousin Tybalt's friends on the opposite side of the room had gone stiff, their laughter turning sharp and performative. It was in the blood that ran in this city, a silent, stupid war between our families. Your Montagues with their old money tech bro swagger, and my Capulets with our new money real estate empire ruthlessness. A feud so ancient nobody remembered how it started, only that we were supposed to hate each other. My father's voice, a low growl over dinner tables, echoed in my head. Those Montagues think they own this city. They look at us and see trash that got lucky. And your family, no doubt, said the same about us. But in that moment, you weren't a Montague. You were just a boy with kind eyes and a laugh that made me want to hear it again. Closer. Our eyes met. The thumping bass vanished again. You didn't look away with the cold dismissal I'd seen from other Montague boys. You didn't smirk with challenge. You just looked, curious, as if you'd found something you hadn't even known you were searching for. It was Rosaline, of course, who bridged the gap. She knew your friend, Ben. And within minutes, we were all talking. A little island of forced neutrality in a sea of generational animosity. You introduced yourself, your voice softer than I'd imagined, with a cadence that made even simple words sound like a secret. "I'm Romeo," you said. "Juliet," I replied, and my name felt new on my tongue. We talked about everything and nothing. The terrible music, the sticky floor, the book I had tucked in my bag, its spine pressing against my side like a promise of a better, quieter world. You didn't mock me for it. You asked what it was about. That was the first crack in my armor. The second was when Tybalt found us. His face, usually arranged in a mask of bored arrogance, was contorted with a real hot anger. "Juliet," he said, his voice ablade. He didn't even look at you. "Your father is looking for you." You didn't flinch. You just straightened up, meeting his glare with a calm that seemed to infuriate him more. "We're just talking," you said, your voice even. "She doesn't talk to your kind," Tybalt spat. And then you did the most revolutionary thing possible. You smiled, a small, sad thing. "Seems like she can make up her own mind." You looked back at me, and in your eyes, I saw an apology for the scene, and the question, "Is this what you want?" I gave a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of my head. "Number, this is not what I want." That was the beginning, the forbidden, stupid, glorious beginning. Our world became a series of stolen moments, a secret geography of the city our families shared, but never truly inhabited together. You'd text me from your family's sleek, silent electric car, parked a block away from my father's gated faux Italian villa. I'd sneak out my window, not to a balcony, but to the flat gravel-strewn roof of the garage, where I could climb down the old oak tree whose branches were my freedom road. We met in places that belonged to neither Capulet nor Montague. The 24-hour diner with the cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like fuel. The public library's astronomy section under the painted dome of a fake night sky. The empty, echoing train yard at dusk. It was in the train yard, sitting on a sun-warmed rail, that you first kissed me. The city skyline was a jagged silhouette against a peach-colored sky, and you told me about your mother, a poet who died when you were young, and how your father wanted you to take over the family's venture capital firm, but all you wanted to do was build things with your hands, restore old motorcycles. They see a legacy, you said, your fingers laced with mine. Our skin, your beautiful brown against my pale, almost translucent white, was a stark, beautiful contrast, a map of our divide. I just see a cage. I know, I whispered, because I did. My cage was just gilded with different bars, debutante balls, a future as the pretty, polished wife of some business ally my father approved of, a life of smiling through clenched teeth. You kissed me then, and it wasn't a gentle, tentative first kiss. It was a confession. It was a promise. It was the quiet, devastating answer to a question the universe had been asking since the moment our eyes met across that loud, stupid room. Your lips were soft, and you tasted of mint and the faint metallic hint of the city air. When we pulled apart, the world had shifted on its axis. There was no going back. It's you, Juliet, you said, your forehead resting against mine. It's only ever been you. We were reckless in our happiness. We thought our secret was a fortress. We were wrong. Tybalt, with his network of friends and his bottomless well of spite, found out. He saw a photo on a friend of a friend's private story, my head on your shoulder as we watched a movie on my laptop in the back of the diner. The fallout was nuclear. My father didn't yell. His disappointment was a cold, suffocating blanket. A Montague, Juliet? Have you lost your mind, or do you just enjoy spitting on everything this family has built? My mother pleaded. It's a phase, baby. He's handsome, I'll give him that, but it's not real. It can't be. They took my phone. They locked the gates. They scheduled a family dinner with Paris, my father's blandly handsome business partner, a man who saw me as a desirable merger, not a person. I felt like I was drowning. The only thing that kept my head above water was the memory of your hand in mine. I managed to get a message to you through Rosaline, who was now officially excommunicated from the Capulet inner circle for her role as our initial accomplice. The message was desperate, a single line. Meet me at the church, the old one. Midnight. The First Methodist Church was a relic, a crumbling stone fortress in a neighborhood both our families had abandoned for shinier zip codes. It was our place, our sanctuary. We'd go there sometimes and just sit in the empty pews, the dust motes dancing in the colored light from the stained glass windows. I got there first, my heart a frantic bird against my ribs. When you pushed the heavy oak door open, the moonlight streaming in behind you outlined your form in silver. You looked tired, your shoulders slumped with a weight no 18-year-old should carry. You saw my face, red and swollen from crying, and you crossed the space in 3 long strides, pulling me into your arms. Juliet, you breathed into my hair, and the sound of my name on your lips was a balm. They're making me marry Paris, I choked out, the words ugly and raw. You stiffened. No, they can't. They can. They will. It's all arranged. We stood there in the silent, holy dark, holding on to each other as if the tide was trying to pull us apart. The world, with all its stupid ancient rules, was closing in. Our secret geography was being annexed, street by street. It was then that the idea was born. Not from a wise friar, but from our own desperate, foolish hearts. We were in the one place that felt outside of their jurisdiction, a building dedicated to a love greater than any family feud. It felt like a sign. Marry me, you whispered, your voice thick with emotion. I looked up at you. What? Marry me. Right here, right now, we'll find someone, a justice of the peace, someone. We'll do it legally. Then they can't keep us apart. Then it's not just their word against ours. It's the law. It was insane. It was the most insane thing I had ever heard. It was also the only thing that made any sense. Yes, I said, and the word felt like a key turning in a lock. Yes. We found an old retired minister who lived nearby, a man named Lawrence who had once baptized Rosaline. He was a gentleman with eyes that had seen too much, and he listened to our frantic, tumbling story with a sad patience. Children, he said softly, a marriage license is not a shield. It can become a weapon in the wrong hands. It's all we have, you said, your voice steady, your hand gripping mine so tightly I could feel the bones. It's the only way. He looked at us, at our intertwined hands, at the desperate, defiant love in our eyes. He sighed a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of all the world's foolish, beautiful tragedies. And he married us, in his small, book-lined study, under a single bright lamp, with Rosaline and Ben as our only witnesses. You slid a simple silver band onto my finger, one you'd bought from a pawn shop on the way. I had nothing to give you but my promise. I do, I said. I do, you said. For a few fleeting hours we were invincible. We were Mr. and Mrs. Montague. We had beaten them. We hadn't. The news of our secret wedding didn't break. The fight did. You, trying to de-escalate, trying to get Tybalt to just walk away after he confronted you outside the convenience store. Him spitting venom, calling you names that had nothing to do with our families and everything to do with the color of your skin. The hatred, raw and ugly and personal. Ben trying to hold you back. Tybalt taking a swing, the shove, the sickening crack of his head against the curb. It wasn't murder. The police report would later call it manslaughter. But in the eyes of my family, and in the crushing weight of my own grief, it was a death sentence. My cousin was dead, and you were the one who pushed him. You were exiled, sent away by your terrified family to stay with relatives upstate until the trouble blew over. It was a lifetime away. The world went grey. The color had drained out of everything. My father, believing my devastation was solely for Tybalt, moved the wedding to Paris forward. To give you something to focus on, he said, to show our family is still strong. I was a ghost in my own life, trapped. I went to Lawrence, the only adult who knew the whole terrible truth. He gave me a way out, a desperate, dangerous way out. It wasn't a magical sleeping potion, but a handful of powerful sedatives he'd kept from a past surgery. It will mimic death for nearly 48 hours, he whispered, his face ashen. I will send word to Romeo. I will get him the message. When you wake up in the family mausoleum, he will be there. I will make sure of it. You can both disappear. Start over. It was a mad plan, a terrifying plan, but it was the only plan. The night before my wedding to Paris, I took the pills with a swallow of water that tasted like fear. I lay down on my bed, in my ridiculous, frilly room, and I thought of you. I thought of your laugh. I thought of the feel of your hand in mine. I thought of the way you looked at me, like I was the entire universe, not just a Capulet, not just a prize. As the darkness pulled me under, my last thought was your name. But the message never reached you. The story that found you, filtered through the panic of your cousin, was simpler, cleaner, more tragic. Juliet Capulet was dead, grief-stricken over her cousin. A heart attack, they said. You drove through the night. You broke into the cemetery where my family's grand marble mausoleum stood, a cold, hard monument to our name. You found me there, on the stone slab, pale and still in the dress I'd worn the night we met. You believed it. I remember the feeling of waking up. It was like swimming up from the bottom of a deep, cold ocean. My limbs were lead, my tongue thick in my mouth. The air was cold and smelled of dust and old flowers. The first thing I saw was the stone ceiling. The second thing I saw was you. You were on your knees beside the slab, your head bowed, your shoulders shaking. In your hand was a small, sleek pistol, your father's, I later learned, the ultimate symbol of the Montague protection. Romeo! My voice was a dry rasp. Your head snapped up, your eyes, red-rimmed and hollow, with a grief I could barely comprehend, widened in sheer, unadulterated shock. Juliet, you whispered. You're... You dropped the gun. It clattered on the stone floor, the sound impossibly loud in the silent tomb. You scrambled up, your hands cupping my face, warm and alive against my cold skin. You're alive. Tears were streaming down your face, and then down mine. We were a mess of relief and confusion, and a love that felt like it had just cheated death itself. Lawrence's plan, I stammered. The pills. I thought you knew. You shook your head, a sob escaping your lips that was half laugh, half agony. They told me you were dead. I believed them. I couldn't. I couldn't live in a world without you in it. We held each other in the dim light of the emergency lamp, clinging to this second chance, this miracle. We had lost everything, our families, our names, our place in this city. But we had each other. We had this. We stumbled out of the mausoleum just as the first hints of dawn were painting the sky. The city was quiet, holding its breath. We didn't look back at the Capulet Manor or in the direction of the Montague penthouse. We just got into your old beat-up car, the one you loved, the one your father hated, the one you'd driven here through the night. You started the engine, and the familiar rumble felt like a heartbeat. You reached across the console, your hand finding mine, your thumb stroking the simple silver band I still wore. Where to? You asked, your voice still rough with spent emotion. I looked at you, at the road ahead, at the endless, open possibility. I thought of the families we were leaving behind, the war we were ending not with a truce, but with our absence. I thought of the story they would tell, a story of two stupid, reckless kids who died for love. But we didn't die. We escaped. I squeezed your hand, our skin, light and dark, forever intertwined. Anywhere, I said, let's just go. first time he saw her, she was a splash of crimson against the grimy brick of La Rousseau's alley. It wasn't just the cheap, fringed dress she wore. It was the way she occupied the space, a bold, unapologetic slash of life in the pre-dawn gloom of Manhattan's garment district. Edward Lewis, hunched in the back of a borrowed Rolls-Royce, his head throbbing in time with the engine's idle, saw her through the fogged window and felt a jolt that had nothing to do with his hangover. "Stop the car," he said, his voice a gravelly command. His driver, a man named Bernard, who had seen his employer through worse, complied without a word. Edward watched her. She was arguing with a man in a stained apron, her hands on her hips, a cloche hat pulled low over her eyes. Even from this distance, he could see the animation in her face, the way her entire body spoke. She was nothing like the silent porcelain dolls who populated his world. She was all noise and nerve. He needed a distraction. The fight with his business partner, a venomous clash over the systematic dismemberment of a struggling shipping company, had left a bitter taste in his mouth that all the bootleg gin in New York couldn't wash away. He was rich, powerful, and utterly, profoundly bored. He stepped out of the car. The cold air beat through his tailored overcoat. $50. The man in the apron was sneering at her. For the whole night. Take it or leave it, Viv. 50, she laughed, a sound like shattering glass. For that you can have my stockings, Lou. The night's worth a C note, and you know it. $100? Edward found himself speaking. Both of them turned. The girl, Viv, looked him up and down, her gaze as assessing as a pawnbroker's. She saw the expensive coat, the weary, handsome face, the eyes that held more calculation than warmth. "You looking for a good time, mister?" she asked, her voice dropping into a practiced husky purr. "Costs extra to cut in line." "I need a driver," Edward said, the idea forming as he spoke. "I've rented a car for the week. I need someone who knows the city. The price is $100 for your company for the day." Viv's bravado flickered for a second, replaced by a sharp curiosity. This was a different kind of proposition. "Just drive you around?" "And attend a few functions." "As my assistant." She looked from his face to the gleaming Rolls-Royce, then back to Lou, who was watching with a sour expression. $100 was a fortune. It was rent for months. It was a way out of La Rousseau's alley. "You got yourself a driver, mister," she said, grabbing a small beaded bag from the ground. "But the hat stays on." The first stop was the Plaza Hotel. Edward watched, fascinated, as she navigated the opulent lobby. She didn't shrink from the marble and gilt. She challenged it, her head held high, her hips swinging with a rhythm that seemed to mock the staid, waltzing tempo of the place. In his suite, overlooking the park, he handed her a stack of bills. "Go to wherever you go, buy a dress. Something suitable for lunch at the St. Regis." Viv took the money, her fingers closing around the crisp notes. "Suitable? You mean dull." "I mean expensive," he corrected. She returned 2 hours later, and when she stepped into the sitting room, Edward felt the air leave his lungs. She was wearing a dress of emerald green silk, simple and shockingly modern. It had no fringe, no beads, just clean lines that hugged her figure before falling in a soft column to her knees. The cheap cloche was gone, replaced by a sleek, side-tilted hat that revealed a sharp, intelligent face and eyes the color of good whiskey. "Will this do?" she asked, a challenge in her voice. He could only nod. Lunch was a revelation. She mangled the silverware, called the sommelier doll, and ate her oysters with an unbridled gusto that drew stares from the surrounding tables. Edward, who conducted business lunches like surgical strikes, found himself laughing for the first time in years. "So what is it you do, anyway?" she asked, spearing a piece of asparagus. "You don't look like a bootlegger. Too tense." "I'm a corporate raider," he said, choosing the term he used in the papers. "A what?" I buy companies, he explained, simplifying it for what he assumed was her understanding, and I break them apart. Sell the pieces for more than I paid for the whole. Viv put her fork down, her head tilted. So you're a kind of legalized chop shop. You find a nice running car, strip it for parts, and scrap the body. Edward stared at her. No one had ever put it so bluntly, so accurately. That's one way of looking at it. Seems a shame, she said, picking up her champagne flute. Killing something that works just for the pieces. Her words struck a nerve he hadn't known was exposed. The week unfolded in a whirlwind of silk and champagne. Edward found himself extending her contract, day by day. 100 became 2, then 3. He took her to the opera, where she wept openly at La Traviata, and to a smoky jazz club in Harlem, where she taught him the Charleston, her laughter echoing over the wail of the trumpet. He, in turn, taught her which fork to use, how to read a stock ticker, and the subtle art of the corporate bluff. In the quiet moments, in the car, or over late-night room service, they talked. He told her about his cold, boarding school childhood, his father who saw affection as a weakness. She told him about growing up in a tenement in Brooklyn, dreaming of Hollywood pictures and silk stockings that didn't have to be darned. It's like you're always wearing a mask, she said to him one night, her feet tucked under her on the plush sofa. The big, tough businessman. But I see the cracks. And what do you see in the cracks? He asked, his voice soft. A guy who's lonely, she said simply. The facade was crumbling. The deal, the one he had been obsessing over, began to feel hollow. The shipping company wasn't just an asset. It was run by a man who loved his ships, who knew his crew by name. Viv's analogy of the chop shop haunted him. The climax came at the charity polo match in Long Island. It was the event of the season, a sea of white flannels and picture hats. Viv, in a stunning white and silver dress and a wide-brimmed hat, looked like she had been born into this world. She was a sensation, her wit and unpretentious charm disarming the stuffiest of the old guard. It was there that his business partner, Philip Stuckey, found them. Stuckey, a man whose smile was as sharp as a razor blade, saw Viv not as a person, but as a transaction. So this is the new model, Edward? Stuckey sneered, his eyes raking over Viv. A bit flashy for a business accessory, isn't she? How much is this one costing you? I hope you're getting your money's worth. The mask Edward wore shattered. In a cold, quiet fury, he turned on Stuckey. You will apologize to the lady. Lady? Stuckey laughed. She's a 2-bit trollop you picked up on Broadway. Everyone knows it. Edward's fist connected with Stuckey's jaw with a satisfying crack. It was an unthinkable breach of decorum, a primal, glorious mess. As Stuckey sprawled in the grass, the genteel crowd gasped. In the car ride back to the city, the silence was heavy. The fantasy was over. The real world, with its cruel labels and harsh judgments, had crashed their party. Back at the plaza, Edward felt a panic rising in his chest. He couldn't let her go. The thought of returning to his life without her in it was unbearable. Stay, he said, his back to her, as he looked out at the glittering city. I'll set you up in an apartment. You'll want for nothing. Viv, who had been taking off her pearls, went very still. The hope that had been blossoming in her chest withered and died. He was offering her a fancier cage, a gilded version of LaRusso's alley. You really don't get it, do you? Her voice was quiet, stripped of all its usual bravado. I want more than that. What more is there? He asked, genuinely bewildered. Money can give you anything. It can't buy you the right to walk down the street holding the hand of the fella you love, she said, her words sharp and clear, and not have people call you a whore. The word hung in the air between them, ugly and final. I love you, he said, the words foreign on his tongue. She smiled, a sad, broken thing. You just said you'd set me up. You don't love me, Edward. You love having me. There's a difference. She placed the emerald green dress, neatly folded, on the bed. Then she took the stack of $100 bills he had given her that first day from her bag and laid it beside the dress. "I want the fairy tale," she whispered and walked out. The suite was tomb silent. Edward stared at the empty space where she had been. The money on the bed seemed to mock him. It was the one thing he had always believed in, his ultimate tool, his weapon, his shield. And she had left it all behind. For a week, he threw himself back into the deal. He finalized the takeover of the shipping company. He won. He sat in his office, the signed contracts on his desk, and felt nothing. An echoing, cavernous nothing. Viv's face, her laugh, her accusation, "You just love having me," were all he could see, all he could hear. He had spent his life collecting things, breaking things, owning things, and in the process, he had broken himself. Meanwhile, Viv was back in her tiny room above the alley, packing her few belongings into a worn-out suitcase. She was leaving for California, chasing her own fairy tale on a Greyhound bus. She had her self-respect and a heart that felt like it had been run through a wringer. But she was free. It was her friend Kit, a fellow dancer, who burst in, breathless. "Viv, turn on the radio. It's about your fella." With a trembling hand, Viv twisted the dial. The announcer's voice, crisp and official, filled the room. In a stunning reversal, financier Edward Lewis has not only abandoned his hostile takeover of Morse Shipping, but has provided a substantial, no-strings-attached loan to modernize their fleet. In a statement read by his lawyer, Lewis said, and I quote, "Some things are too valuable to break. Some things are meant to be built and to sail on." Viv's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. Down in the alley, a familiar long black motorcar pulled to a stop. The door opened and Edward Lewis stepped out. He wasn't wearing his usual uniform of power. His tie was loose, his hair was messy, and in his hands he held not a contract or a briefcase, but a single long-stemmed red rose and a white, flag-wrapped bundle. He looked up at her window, her heart hammering against her ribs. Viv ran down the narrow, dark stairs and out into the alley. They stood facing each other, the world of Park Avenue and LaRusso's alley colliding once more. "You came back," she said, her voice trembling. "I had to," he said. "I'm not much of a knight." "I don't have a white horse." He held out the rose. "But I have this." Then he handed her the bundle. It was an admiral's hat, the kind the captain of a ship would wear. She took it, confusion and hope warring in her eyes. "The fairy tale," Edward said, his voice raw with emotion. "You were right. I was trying to buy it, to own it, but I was looking for it in all the wrong places." He gestured to the hat in her hands. "I don't want to set you up in an apartment, Viv. I want to build a life with you. I want us to be partners, first mates, on whatever ship we decide to sail." He was offering her not a cage, but an ocean. Tears streamed down Viv's face, but she was smiling, a real, brilliant, Hollywood-ending smile. She tossed the admiral's hat onto her head, where it sat at a jaunty, ridiculous angle. "Well," she said, linking her arm through his, "it's about time you showed up." And as he leaned in to kiss her, there in the grimy, honest alley where it had all begun, the city around them didn't disappear. It just finally started to make sense. first time I knew, truly knew it was you, was because of a typo. Not a grand, dramatic reveal in a rainy garden, not a confession over coffee, a typo. 3 little letters tapped out in a hurry on your phone. You'd replied to my tweet about the peculiar sadness of finishing a good book with, "The worst. That liminal space is the pits. The pits. Not the pits. The pits. With 2 T's. My breath hitched in my chest, a tiny pathetic sound lost in the quiet of my bookstore. I was standing behind the counter, the scent of old paper and fresh coffee hanging in the air, and the world tilted on its axis. Because at NYC Bookworm, the witty, charming, infuriatingly insightful man I'd been talking to for 3 months on this hell site, the man who made me laugh during my commute and think before I went to sleep, always spelled it that way. The pits. And you, Joe Fox, the man whose family's gleaming, soulless book superstore, Fox Books, was currently metastasizing down the block, slowly choking the life out of my little shop. The shop around the corner had just typed it out in a public reply to me. 2 at Spinning Sheep, my own carefully curated online persona. The irony was so perfect it felt scripted. You were my professional nemesis and my digital sanctuary. You were the reason I lay awake at night staring at the ceiling, calculating rent and sobbing into my pillow, and you were also the reason I smiled at my phone on the subway, feeling seen and understood in a way I hadn't in years. It started, as so many modern tragedies do, with a stupid viral thread. Someone had asked, "What's a book that fundamentally changed how you see the world?" I, at Spinning Sheep, had quipped back, "Charlotte's Web." It taught me about friendship, sacrifice, and the power of good copywriting. Some Pig is still the most effective marketing campaign in history. You, at NYC Bookworm, had replied, "Counterpoint, terrific was the real hero. It's all about the follow-through." We'd fallen into a rhythm after that. A like on a post about the best way to brew tea. A comment on the shared misery of a delayed L train. It evolved into DMs, first about books, then about everything and nothing. The sound of rain on a fire escape, the specific loneliness of a Sunday night. You told me about your father, a looming presence who thought sentiment was a weakness. I told you about my mother, a whirlwind of optimism who had left me this bookstore, this beautiful failing albatross. You were smart. You were funny. You got my references. You never once used a crying laughing emoji. I started to look for your name in my notifications the way I used to look for a letter in the mail. You became the brightest part of my day. And all the while in the real world, you were destroying me. The first time you walked into the shop around the corner, the bell above the door didn't just jingle. It sounded a warning knell. You were taller than I'd imagined, and more solid. At NYC Bookworm lived in my phone as a collection of witty words and perfectly timed GIFs. You, in person, wore a cashmere coat and an expression of polite, predatory interest. "Joe Fox," you'd said, extending a hand. Your grip was firm, your skin warm. "We're opening up down the street." "Kathleen Kelly," I'd replied, my voice tighter than I'd wanted it to be. I knew who you were. Everyone in the indie book-selling scene knew the Foxes. You were the Walmart of wonder, the Starbucks of stories. You'd looked around, your eyes taking in the worn velvet armchairs, the carefully curated staff picks shelf, the children's nook with its tiny, paint-chipped table. "It's a lovely place," you'd said, and you'd almost sounded like you meant it. Charming. Charming. The word was a death sentence. You might as well have patted me on the head. Charming things are quaint. They are not profitable. They are not long for this world. Our real-life interactions were a series of thinly veiled skirmishes. We'd run into each other at coffee shops, at industry events, and every time it was a verbal duel. You were all cool logic and market forces. I was all heart and history. You talk about volume discounts and consumer experience. I'd talk about knowing a customer's name and their grandmother's favorite genre. We were speaking different languages, and I hated you for your confidence, for your clean shaven ease, for the way you made my life's work seem like a sentimental hobby. And then I'd go home, open my laptop, and there you'd be. At NYC Bookworm, at Spinning Sheep you'd DM, saw a woman reading on a park bench today and wondered what you'd recommend for her. She looked like she needed an adventure. At NYC Bookworm, I'd type back, my fingers flying, if she was wearing a red coat, probably something with a journey. A red coat always signals a protagonist with places to go. See? The Matrix, Schindler's List, Little Red Riding Hood. Point taken, though I'd hope for a happier ending than the latter. I was living a double life and the two halves were at war. I'd complain to you at NYC Bookworm about the soulless corporate behemoth trying to put me out of business. You'd listen, you'd offer sympathy, and sometimes you'd play devil's advocate. Maybe you'd typed once, it's not personal. Maybe it's just business. The world changes. The world changes, I'd fired back. But shouldn't some things stay the same? Shouldn't there be places that feel like home? You didn't reply for a long time. Then, yes, there should. The day I put the final week, everything must go sign in the window, I felt like I was drilling a nail into my own mother's coffin. The store was a ghost of itself, shelves gaping like missing teeth. I took a picture of the empty children's nook, the little table bare, and posted it on my stories with the caption, "So long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, good night." You DM'd me immediately. At Spinning Sheep, I'm so sorry. That's a real loss. Tears pricked my eyes. It feels like a death, I typed, my vision blurring. A stupid, preventable death. I know, you wrote. And then a moment later, I wish I could buy you a coffee, or a very, very strong drink. A drink sounds good, I replied, the words feeling dangerous. Maybe someday. Someday you agreed. And then, an hour later, you, Joe Fox, walked into my dying shop. The bell, which I'd soon be taking down, gave its familiar mournful ring. You were holding 2 paper cups from the cafe down the street. You looked around the hollowed-out space, and your face, usually a mask of pleasant confidence, was unreadable. "Kathleen," you said, your voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "Come to gloat?" I asked, my arms crossed over my chest. I was wearing an old sweater of my mother's, and I felt small and defenseless. "No," you said, and you sounded genuinely hurt. "I came to... I don't know. I brought you tea, Earl Grey. The way you like it." You held out a cup. I stared at it. How did you know I liked Earl Grey? I'd never told Joe Fox that, but I'd told at NYC Bookworm. Just last week, I'd said it was my comfort drink, the literary equivalent of a warm blanket. The pieces, which had been hovering at the edge of my consciousness for weeks, slammed together. The way you both referenced the same obscure essays, the shared opinion on the film adaptation of The Goldfinch, the specific, peculiar way you both used the word liminal, and the typos, the goddamn typos. Pits. My hand trembled as I took the cup, our fingers brushed. "Thank you," I whispered. You looked at me, really looked at me, and your eyes were the same shade of brown they were in my DMs. They held the same kindness, the same intelligence. The man who was dismantling my life and the man who was holding it together were the same person. "It's a shame," you said, gesturing to the empty shelves. "It really was a lovely shop." "You said that before," I replied, my voice steadier now. "You said it was charming. You had the decency to look chastened." "I did, and I meant it. But charming isn't enough, is it? It doesn't convey what it feels like in here. It feels like you curated a world, not just a stock list." It was exactly what at NYC Bookworm would have said. I took a sip of the tea. It was perfect. "You know," I said, looking at you over the rim of the cup, "it's the funniest thing. I have this friend online, and he always misspells the pits. He writes the pits with 2 T's. You went completely still. Your eyes widened just a fraction, and I saw the realization dawn in them. The color drained from your face, then rushed back. You looked caught, exposed. Kathleen, you began, your voice a low rasp. It's okay, I said, and to my immense surprise, I found that I meant it. The anger, the betrayal I thought I'd feel, it wasn't there. There was just a profound, exhausting sense of clarity. I figured it out, just now. You ran a hand through your hair. I didn't plan it. It just happened. And then the more I got to know you online, the more I realized who you were in real life, and I didn't know how to untangle it. Why would you want to? I asked. You were winning both ways. You got to put me out of business and be my best friend. It wasn't like that, you said, stepping closer. The empty shop echoed around us. You have to believe me. Talking to you, it was the only thing that felt real. You made me question everything. My job, my life, what my father built. You made me see it all differently. You made me different. I thought of our late-night messages, the way you'd slowly started to admit that maybe big stores lacked soul, the way you'd asked me just last week what I thought made a community. I don't know who to be angrier at, I said softly. You, for being the fox in the hen house, or you, for being the one who made me laugh when I wanted to cry. Be angry at the first one, you said, a ghost of a smile on your lips. Please. The second one. He's hopelessly in love with you. The words hung in the dusty air between us. They weren't in a DM. They weren't pixels on a screen. They were sound waves, physical things, and they vibrated right through me. That's not fair, I whispered. You can't say that here. Not after everything. Where else can I say it? You asked, your voice raw. The garden is closed for the season. The email would feel insufficient, and a tweet, well, that would just be crass. You were quoting our conversation from last month about the worst ways to be told I love you. A laugh escaped me, a watery, choked sound. You remember that? I remember everything you say, you replied, and you took another step closer. We were standing in the middle of the empty store, surrounded by the ghosts of 100,000 stories. It was the end of my world, and it felt impossibly like a beginning. So what happens now? I asked. The shop around the corner is closing. At Spinning Sheep goes dark, and Joe Fox and Kathleen Kelly. What? Go for that drink? You looked at me, and for the first time, I saw no trace of the corporate raider, no hint of the slick businessman. I just saw the man from my phone, the one who understood about Sunday nights and red coats and the peculiar sadness of finishing a good book. The world changes, you said softly, echoing your own words from our DMs. But some things should stay the same. Or maybe some things should just begin. You reached out, and this time you took my hand. Your grip was warm, solid, real. How about that drink, Kathleen Kelly? I looked down at our joined hands. I thought of the long, lonely winter ahead. I thought of the empty store and the full, vibrant connection I'd found in the most unlikely of places. Okay, I said, my voice small but sure. Okay, Joe Fox. It's a date. And as we walked out of the shop for the last time, you holding my hand, me turning off the lights, I had the strangest feeling. It wasn't an ending. It was the first sentence of a new story, and for the first time in a long time, I couldn't wait to turn the page.